Hi guys, we're going to jump into our lesson today over European land claims. Okay, it is Monday, January 25th. You do have a show it today, and don't forget your daily geography. All right. So European land claims. As the Europeans began to explore the New World, so we've talked about all these explorers from Portugal and Spain and England and France and even Dutch explorers. They're coming to the New World, and so they've decided they want to build, their countries want to build their empires stronger. So an intense competition starts. Everybody wants to claim these land, okay? And then obviously it's going to start some problems with the natives who already lived here, okay? But an intense competition to claim the most land in the Western Hemisphere begins, okay? So those European empires, again, began claiming land for their countries and colonizing the Western Hemisphere. What colonizing means is to send a group of settlers to a place to set up a community and establish political control over an area. I love this map that we see here because it really breaks down what countries were in certain areas. We can tell that the Spanish really conquered a lot of this area. That's why there's so much Latin influence, okay, and Spanish influence in Central and South America. The Portuguese also they also colonized a big chunk of South America. We obviously know that the English had a pretty big presence in the United States, okay? The 13 colonies, which we're going to talk about, in a lot of Canada. The French also had a huge stake in the US for a while, or what is now the US for a while, which we'll talk about. And then there's other little like Dutch and Danish colonies, okay, in different places. So the first land claims were actually from Portugal and Spain. We know that Christopher Columbus was sailing for Spain, okay? Portugal was also in the on the forefront of exploration as well, okay? What these two countries did, because they were the first to the Western Hemisphere and really the first to start exploring, is they signed something called the Treaty of Tordesillas. Okay, I'm probably saying that wrong. What this treaty did, it was an agreement between Spain and Portugal that they would just divide the entire, basically globe, okay, between the two countries. They ran this line down and they said, okay, everything on this side in the west, Spain can have, they can explore, but we want everything. Portugal wanted something or everything over here. That's why they have just that chunk in Brazil, kind of extended a little past that line. And that's why Spain colonized all these other areas, okay? It was so official that the Pope actually ratified it in Italy, okay? So Spain starts claiming land. They use that treaty and they send Vasco de Balboa to claim all land touching the Pacific Ocean for Spain. They're like, this is ours now, no matter who lives there, okay? The Spanish end up conquering both the Aztec and the Incan empires, which we talked about earlier this year. By the mid-16th century, Spain had gained control over the majority of the western part of South America, what is now Central America, especially Mexico, and even the Caribbean, so those islands, okay? Now, Portugal did have they did also use this treaty in their advantage to claim lands. Obviously, we know that they took a big chunk of eastern South America. They also colonized part of Africa and little places in Asia and Europe as well, okay? However, did the treaty stick? No. By the 16th century, the rest of Europe is like, okay, wait, that's not fair. Spain and Portugal can't take everything. So they begin to ignore this treaty and they start claiming lands for themselves. The treaty, while it helps Spain and Portugal get ahead of everyone, it didn't really give them a right to all of the land, okay? England and France both tried to claim land in the 16th century, but they kind of failed. But eventually they were successful later on. So England, let's talk about them. They claimed land in what is now Virginia and the New England areas where there are 13 colonies, our original 13 colonies were. We're going to talk about them on Friday. They set up multiple colonies, obviously 13 original ones, okay? France then claims kind of the Midwest area, the middle of what is now the United States and Canada to set up colonies. And they named that area, remember, in what is now the United States, Louisiana. Eventually, when Thomas Jefferson becomes president, so hundreds of years after they claim it, Thomas Jefferson will strike a deal with France to purchase that land for the United States. The Netherlands was also in on these claims. They set up very small colonies called New Netherland. What a creative name, right? In what is now modern day New York. Okay, they would later settle part of Greenland as well, but very small colonies. Sweden also set up very small colonies. Okay, they claimed an area which is now near the Delaware River. Okay, right over here, and they named it New Sweden. Again, what a creative name. Russia even got into it. They their empire is right here. This is kind of like a flipped version of the globe, okay? But here's Russia, well, what would be Russia later, okay? And they actually traveled across and they claimed what is now Alaska, okay, for themselves. As more and more land is claimed, that competition just grows fiercer between the European countries and natives, okay? The natives are mad. It's their land. They've lived there for centuries, okay? And now these people are just coming and deciding, hey, we're taking over. I do want to touch on something called the Coronado Expedition. This kind of goes with the Spanish explorers, okay? In the year 1540, a Spanish explorer named Francisco Vázquez de Coronado and several hundred of his men began exploring north of Mexico. They had heard these native stories about cities of gold, and they decided to explore, okay? So before Spain had kind of stayed down here in like the Yucatan Peninsula, but Coronado, he took them up and they actually started to explore what is now part of the Southwest region and West regions of the United States. They didn't find any, they found no cities of gold. Bummer, right? I mean, we wish. But they did claim that area for Spain. And again, or for Spain, you can still see that Spanish influence in this area as well in the culture. So what happened though? Some good things did come of this, even though the natives were upset. Trading began, okay? Something called the Columbia Exchange. It was named after Columbus. So after his first trip, he comes back for a second expedition in 1493, the year after he had come to North America. He brings ships. So we're talking about Christopher Columbus. He brings ships full of goods to the New World, things that the New World, the Western Hemisphere, the natives had never seen before. He, when he returned to Europe after that, he also brought many goods back with him that the Europeans had never seen before. So you have to think different crops and different animals lived on these continents and they had never traded and so now they're kind of seeing how the other half of the world lives and they're exposing each other to the things they have, some good, some bad. Okay. This again would be known as the Columbian Exchange in honor of Christopher Columbus. So some stuff that was new to the Western Hemisphere. So some stuff that Columbus brought from Europe to the New World, okay? New languages, new farming techniques, new weaponry, new animals, okay? They also traded food and crops, but also in a not so great note, disease, okay? Which we're gonna talk about all of them. New languages. As these explorers from all over Europe, okay, begin settling these areas, the natives quickly begin to learn their languages. The Europeans want the natives to learn so they can make them Christians and they can become more educated. It's also kind of a selfish act because they want them to be able to sign treaties. A lot of the time, the natives didn't know what they were signing, okay, and they were signing away their land to these European countries, and they didn't really know what they were signing because they could not read that language, okay? The Europeans also brought different farming techniques, okay? They brought plows and horses, which helped the Native Americans to plant larger fields and to actually helped everyone to start building larger villages and towns. Weaponry, okay? New, more advanced weapons like guns and steel knives were introduced to the natives, and this allowed them to hunt more effectively, especially larger game. Animals, Columbus did bring over lots of different new species of animals. He introduced horses to the New World, dogs, pigs, cattle, chickens, sheep, and goats. Think about how different our world would be if the Europeans had never brought any of those over. I wouldn't have Mr. Bow. That would be awful. However, the natives also introduced the Europeans to different animals that the Europeans ended up taking over back to Europe on ships, okay? So they that included turkeys, llamas, alpacas, and guinea pigs that the Europeans took over to Europe, and then now all these animals, you can find them in Europe as well. Food and crops was the biggest one, okay? Plants that flourished in the Americas were sent to Europe. That included beans, squash, chili peppers, bell peppers, cotton, marigold, papayas, petunias, poinsettias, pumpkins, sunflowers, peanuts, tomatoes, sweet potatoes, avocados, pineapples, tobacco, vanilla beans, and cocoa. All of those things had never been grown in Europe before. They didn't know anything about this, okay? So they had new foods, okay? The two most important, though, that were introduced to the Europeans were potatoes and maize, which is corn, okay? Those crops were actually taken to Europe, and they are able to grow in poor soil, okay? So that actually helped Europe, who was struggling at the time with different crops, growing crops and keeping their people fed. So it actually fed many starving Europeans at the time. It was life-changing, okay? Europeans also brought new food from Europe to the New World. I keep putting that in quotes. I know you guys can't see me. That includes sugarcane, bananas, barley, cabbage, carnations, coffee. Oh, thank goodness they brought that. Crabgrass, daffodils, daisies, dandelions. So that is not native to the Western Hemisphere. Dandelions aren't. Lemons, lettuce, lilacs, olives, oranges, peaches, pears, rice, tulips, turnips, and wheat were all introduced, okay, to the New World. Obviously, guys, now we've just mixed all of this, and these foods are in so many different places. However, everything wasn't super positive. There was some negative downsides, okay? When the Europeans came over, they actually, since these civilizations and these people had been isolated from each other, they'd never been around each other, their immunity to fight off new diseases was different, okay? So when the Europeans brought some of their minor sicknesses over, it was way worse on the natives and vice versa. So different diseases killed actually tens of thousands of natives and Europeans because they were mixing their germs for the first time. Rats and insects, they accidentally came over on the ships that the Europeans had brought, and they spread diseases like the bubonic plague and typhus, which actually killed thousands and thousands of natives. Okay. Europeans also transmitted smallpox, sometimes on purpose when they were fighting with different natives, measles, malaria, yellow fever, the influenza, and chickenpox. Okay. Which again, all of these, the natives weren't immune to them. Their immune systems weren't used to them. So it killed a lot of them. The natives also transmitted diseases that included syphilis, polio, hepatitis, and encephalitis, okay, all of which killed a lot of people. All right, so again, some good things happened, food and crops, okay, different animals, different weaponry. It changed the life of the natives, also changed the life of the Europeans, but it wasn't all good because there was disease. If you have any questions, let me know. Go ahead and do your show it. It is posted on Buzz.